Let's get started on this review for Pseudoregalia. So I did complete the game today, and I have a few thoughts that I want to share with you. Now, let's get into the negatives right off the bat, and then we'll go into the positives and kind of give a final thought at the end. So, starting off with the negatives, there are a few different aspects of the game that I didn't really click with. First of all, the map is very confusing and yet very basic. It doesn't have any markers, it is simply just squares and lines. And then it kind of leads you to other zones, meaning it'll have like the entrance to another area and it'll have the name of that area. But that's it. It does highlight in green to let you know that that's the area that you're currently in, but outside of that, you're kind of just up to your own devices to figure it out. Now, with the point of the map, I didn't like it because I got lost very often. Now, in certain games, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this game is smaller and it doesn't have any extremely distinct features in any one zone or map. They are different in their own way, and the art style is charming for those zones. That I don't mind, but it was like, you know, one room kind of bled into another and one hallway kind of matched another. So it was hard to kind of tell exactly where I was going or what I was doing in some cases. Now, the game never tells you where to go or what to do, but not giving you any sort of direction at all, not even telling you your cardinal directions on the map, that bugged me a little bit. Each room is kind of put together in its own shape and design, and they're distinct for the most part, but there were no features that allowed a room individually to stand out from the others for at least the most part. But having that obstacle arise every time that I opened up the map where I had to kind of orient myself in a specific direction because I didn't know if I was facing the right wall or the entrance to this other zone was on the other side of the room, or maybe it was right next to me. I just couldn't quite piece it together, and that led to some frustrating moments. I found myself opening and closing the map multiple times to get myself in the right direction to actually determine where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. So the map wasn't extremely helpful, but I'm glad that they at least had one. But not knowing what to do next, the vagueness of the game. Now, it does create the means for exploration in doing so, and you can sort of tackle the game in any way that you please. And if you're skilled enough, you can bypass certain zones. You can even get abilities early, and then you can go through a zone that maybe you actually weren't meant to, or you can get a different skill out of the normal order that you would normally get. But you have to kind of figure all this out, and one of the ways that it kind of frustrated me is the map and the overworld design behind it is that there's no indicators for collectibles or items that you've gotten, so you can go into a room, think that you've done everything, but you may have missed half of all of the items in the room. So even if there was some sort of toggle that would let you be able to turn on whether or not that room has been cleared, or maybe the collectibles within that room, you know, some players could use it, some players couldn't. Just have the option there. For someone such as myself who likes getting all the collectibles, but not knowing where they are or how to get them is a little bit frustrating. And that kind of leads into the backtracking. Now, I went into the same rooms multiple times and not really knowing what to do in them. What I mean by that is because I thought that I maybe completed everything that room had to offer. I went to every corner, I scoured everything, and maybe, of course, like any Metroidvania, there was a weird thing in the corner that I couldn't access right now, but I got an ability later on that did let me access that, whatever it may be. Let's say it's an area that requires some sort of double jump or a slide jump. Well, there's nothing to indicate that on the map, and you just kind of have to memorize it. And the game is big enough that you end up backtracking into multiple rooms a lot, and then memorizing each one of those distinct features is a little bit frustrating. And it creates this loop where, just like any Metroidvania, you get this new power or ability that lets you progress like you couldn't before. You get to rediscover and re-explore the areas that you've been in before, but if you've been in those rooms 5 times and you can't remember the last time you came in there and maybe what set of abilities you had prior because you've been in there so much, it creates this loop of going back and forth and repeatedly going through these rooms like, okay, I can reach this height that I never could before, or maybe I can double jump onto this wall that I couldn't reach. Or maybe I already did that 2 hours ago. And because there's no map or there's no indicators of any type for anything, it gets in the way. It causes a lot of friction. And then on to the last thing. So combat and enemies. I'm going to kind of put these together. And the reason why that is because there are only maybe 5 enemies in the entire game. There's like a trumpet guy, a hand, a floating witch lady, a knight, and like teeth guys. That's it. Most of them have 1 or 2 attacks, and that's the end of it. Now, your combat is also very simple. You hit the attack button 3 times, your character spins around, and that is it. Now, the cool part about it, to kind of mix that in here a little bit, is you do get to put your traversal mechanics in there with it, right? You can actually sit there and jump around, do a backflip, you know, all this cool stuff, and it meshes well with the combat. But because the combat itself never gets expanded, and because they never introduce new enemy types or patterns for attacks, it gets very stale. Now again, to kind of go back to the idea of this being a smaller game, I don't think that's necessarily a terrible thing to have a very small number of enemies and a very simple combat system. But I do just want to point it out that it does seem like just a means to get to the next traversal mechanic to allow me to get to a better platforming area that's beyond that combat. So sometimes it just kind of felt like it was there just to be there, not because it actually added to the game. So when it comes to my final thoughts of the combat, I would say expand it and make it more robust, or just gut it completely, take it out and enjoy the platforming. That's what this game is about, and that's what it needs to hone in on. Either make the combat fun, make the enemy variety unique and different, or get rid of it. And now I want to talk about all the great things that this game has going for it. I mean, first of all, style. And boy, does it have it in spades. The creator of this actually did a really good job of honing in an idea. And in my preview, I talked about that for the majority of it. This game isn't required to have extreme detail or nuances in every single design, because that's what it was made for. Keep it simple, keep it going. It has this very simple art direction and graphic style of a Nintendo 64 or early PS1 games that fits the vibe so well. The audio design is done pretty fucking well, and on top of that, the platforming is amazing. It plays so well. In the parts that it's lacking in variety in certain aspects, it makes up for in playability. There are developers out there that wish they could make something this smooth and this good feeling. The fact that you can slide down a hallway and then run along a wall, do a backflip, kick into the wall, into another backflip, and all of that is meant to happen. It's by design. It doesn't happen on accident, and you are meant to do that. And when you perform it, it feels good. So the fact that the world is built so well in the idea of being able to use these different abilities and maneuvers to get around the map is a feat among itself. I would say that there's probably not that many people out there that can design a character, a movement system, and a world that meshes as well as this game does. And then kind of back to the music and the audio of the character, the attacks, the jumping, everything it's done in a way that I never got bored or tired of. The only thing is the music sometimes was a little bit too much on a short loop. It was really good music, and each zone has its own unique style to it, and I did love it overall, but my problem is it seemed like the songs were a little short, so they were looping kind of quickly, so you kind of got that repeated tones back to back. But outside of it being just slightly short and hearing those tones over and over again, the music was amazingly implemented in the way it would change whenever you're in combat, and it was done so well. I know that this game was not meant to be something huge. It was not out there to accomplish something crazy and over the top. This is what seems to be a passion project and someone who enjoys movement in games. And they pulled it off. This game is a feat among games. Whenever we look at the game of the year this year, Astrobot in 2024, we think of movement and fun. This game has both of those aspects in spades. Of course, it is not the most fun game, and the movement isn't perfect, Now, this game was made by one person, I believe, which of course didn't have some crazy budget or wasn't meant to be this overall large project, but it kind of blew people away when it came out. Now, I'm just getting around to playing games like this. I don't spend a ton of time playing indie games like this, but I want that to change. I do play some smaller games, but usually they're bigger budget. I don't really play these like single developer games often. Of course, we have standouts this year, specifically with Animal Well and Balatro. This game was only 4 or 5 hours, I want to say, and I enjoyed, I would say, 90% of it. So in my eyes, I would say go out and play this game. Give the developer your time and your money and go enjoy yourself. Don't go in there expecting your world to change or to be in love with this game. But if you like the gameplay that I'm showing and you like the things that I'm saying about it, and you can get over some of the negative aspects that I did provide near the beginning of the video, then go for it. Just jump on it, even if you only play the game for an hour. It is worth it just to try out the systems at play. The movement is so clean, and I hope you realize that. There's another game that's coming out in the near future called Big Catch. That one has my eye as well, and it has a similar vibe, but done to a much larger scale. We'll be playing that one later too. But otherwise, that's it for this review. Go play Pseudoregalia. It's worth it, and I'll see you next time.